Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Talking in Circles. I'm Clayton Caldwell, and I am thrilled to announce that we have uh, four-time O'Reilly Auto Parts Series winner and five-time Truck Series winner Mike Wallace on the show today. We're going to talk about an interesting topic, and it's NASCAR's approval process. It's been getting a lot of play here lately because of Cletus McFarland and his limited experience, and he's been approved to run not only Truck Series races, but now three Xfinity Series races at Rockingham, Talladega, and Daytona for Richard Childress Racing. And I, when I first saw this, Mike, as far as even Cletus being approved for Daytona, and then Cletus being approved for Rockingham and Talladega in the Busch Series, or what we know as the Busch Series, O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, uh, you were the first guy I thought of because to me, Mike, when that happened, when you and for people who don't know the background of exactly what happened, Mike had was approved initially to run, and you can clarify that if you want, but the way I understood it was approved initially to run a Cup race, the Daytona 500, for Garage 66, which is Carl Long's team, and then all of a sudden it was announced that you weren't approved to go racing there in the Daytona 500. This was in 2025, so there was a lot of, to me, you were the first guy I thought of because to me what Mike Wallace was going to do in 2025 with all of his experience, and I went and counted the races, Mike, you have 75 starts at Daytona in your career. That includes the duels, that includes Xfinity trucks, ARCA. And so it's kind of amazing to me that of all the people who got, when these approvals come, it seems like the only guy who recently has gotten disapproved is Mike Wallace. And so I kind of wanted to get your take on initially the Cletus McFarland approval and what your thoughts were.
Well, it depends what question you ask me first. If we're talking about Cletus or myself, the Cletus McFarland deal is fairly simple. I think what it amounts to, the way I understand it, is Ty Dillon reached out to Cletus. Garrett Mitchell is his real name. Cletus
Right.
McFarland is his, we'll call it stage name, and he's an incredible individual.
For
So
sure.
through this whole conversation, I don't want anything to be misconstrued about Cletus not being a cool dude,
He
right?
really is, Mike. I totally agree with you. This is strictly Cletus, the race car driver. I want to make that clear as well.
Yeah.
As far as whether he should drive or shouldn't drive as a race car driver, I think what he does on social media is fantastic. He seems like a really, really good guy. I don't know him personally. You might, but I 100% agree. This is just strictly for him as a race car driver.
Yeah. So I heard this earlier directly out of Ty Dillon's mouth.
Hmm.
Ty Dillon called up Cletus McFarland. Okay. Now, Cletus, as we all know, unfortunately, due to the tragic death of Greg Biffle and his family, has become really well known in the race world. He helped
Right.
Biffle with a lot of that rescue mission stuff in Western North Carolina, but, you know, everything is be like Biff. Be like Biff. So Ty Dillon called up Cletus McFarland and said, "Hey, are you really serious about taking this racing serious, or is this just for postings?" Now, if you're serious about it, RCR. Now you got to remember, Ty Dillon and Austin Dillon are standing in the background waiting for Grandpa RC to go, "Hey, you guys take this whole deal over for me."
Right.
Okay. So Ty is smart enough. He's got a wife that's in the movie industry. She's a beautiful young lady and, stars in some really good TV shows. They're smart enough to go, "Hey, Cletus is out there with millions of views, clicks as people call them. What does RCR need to do to acquire him to help with their sponsorship content?" Sponsorship content meaning sponsorship dollars.
Right.
Cletus says, "Yes, I am serious. I really want to do this." And through that conversation, I understand it's like, okay, RCR would like to field you in a race car and make you a better race car driver. And we're going to pay you $1. That's going to be your salary. Well, that's about $1 more than a lot of guys are getting paid today to drive race cars, to be honest with you. It's really a shame that the salary gap has changed so much in the sport over the years. So, bam, they make the announcement. They get serious. It's announced everywhere. I mean,
Right.
he's got so much star power. Like Cletus we got like Michael Jordan, who is the most the most famous person in the world is a sports athlete. Then we got Cletus. Then we got all the other drivers in NASCAR. That's just about how it works. Even though you get, the Kyle Larsons, Keselowski's, Dillons, all those, they don't have the following that these guys have.
Right.
And it's like, how do you draw that following? So they put a deal together. They'll take him to Rockingham and test him. Go to Rockingham. He can say that he's run the ARCA race at Daytona and Talladega. NASCAR already said he did a good enough job, even though there's question of that. He ran the truck race. He had an unfortunate truck incident, but they're going to approve him. This is all about a business deal now. This is all about money. This is all about, and what I mean by that, and believe me, I'm saying this in a very positive way, as that everybody's in the need for sponsorship dollars. NASCAR's in the need for fan base. Well, what do? You get a guy that's got 5 million followers or 6 million followers, plus all the other people. We're just, Travis Pastrana and him are big buddies. All of Travis's following, they probably dig into the Mr. Beast program. He's got 50 million followers. So all of a sudden, the NASCAR world has got social media following him.
Right.
And it's just a business deal.
So for sure, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head exactly why the intrigue, and I totally get it from an ownership standpoint, why you would want to bring him in. My concern is really the lack of experience he has in racing. And the fact that he's getting approved for these races. And I guess as a race car driver and somebody who's done this their whole life pretty much, is there any concern that you have about that with the cars the way they are today? Or do you think that's not as big of a deal? Because I think there's some people who look at it and say, look at Ricky Rudd. Ricky Rudd went on Dale Jr.'s Download a couple years ago and said, "Hey, I never been in the stock car until I got into a Cup race in the '70s." And Kyle Petty, I think, ran an ARCA race at Daytona in '79 with no experience and won it, and kind of went to Cup shortly after. So I think a lot of people are looking at that as examples, saying, "Hey, back in the day, these guys didn't have a lot of experience, and they turned out to be pretty good race car drivers and successful race car drivers." Where do you stand on that, Mike? Do you think they need some seasoning? I mean, I know you got a son that races still, or at least he did up until last year. I know your daughter was in the Xfinity Series for a little while as well, and she's done a lot of grassroots racing as well. So where do you stand on that?
Well, I'm totally on a confused, biased situation. NASCAR chose to tell me NASCAR president at that time was Steve Phelps.
Right.
And Elton Sawyer was the competition director. In December of 2024, Carl Long and I made an agreement to go to Daytona. I called both of those individuals and emailed them directly because I hadn't raced for a couple of years, but it was no big deal. I just wanted to let them know I was coming back and so forth. And both of their words was, one of them says, "Welcome back. We'll see you in Daytona." And Elton's comment was, "I'll hook you up with membership at the first of the year. Everybody's on vacation." Now, I don't know how much more clear it needs to be than they are okay with it.
Right.
And Chad Little, who is some form, not competition director, but he's got some title, he was telling Carl that, "Hey, I don't know if Mike's approved yet or not." Then out of the clear blue, I get a call from Steve Phelps. I get a call. I don't place the call. I get a call from Steve Phelps going, "Hey, Mike, I'd like to talk to you. Here's my new cell phone number. I'll be in New York City at 9 o'clock Monday morning. Give me a call." I call him. "Steve, how you doing?" "Hey, Mike, everything is great." He says, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm really excited about you coming to Daytona and run the Daytona 500. It's really going to be good for the sport. It's a good story. I apologize. I didn't know your wife passed away, and I understand you're going to put her name on the car, but we're supportive of it 100%. And I want to have a NASCAR media member follow you starting tomorrow morning and document your trip through the Daytona 500. Now, you got to remember, by this time, I've already done, because my brother Kenny has a large social media following. He's already released it basically to the world. I've done Good Morning Orlando live, and they're in Orlando, Florida for 20 minutes. We've told everybody that
Right.
we're race, and everybody knows we're racing. And now the president of NASCAR says, "We want you. You're here. We're going to make a big story out of this." And 3 days later, I get a call from Elton Sawyer at 4 o'clock. I'm standing in Horizon Bank in China Grove, North Carolina, and he goes, "Hey, Mike," he says, "I just want to let you know." And I'm thinking he's going to say, "Hey, everything is great, all the approval, all." He goes, "You can't race anything. You're not approved to race anything at Daytona. You're not approved to run an Xfinity car, a truck, or a Cup car." And I and I laughed at him. I thought he was messing with me. I thought that
Right.
was purpose, and I just thought, "Yeah, Elton, whatever." Because I raced against Elton back in the
Of
day.
course. Yep.
Elton was a Busch Series driver, just like myself. Yeah, I think he won a race, and
Yes, he
then
did.
he got hooked up with Jim France and worked for the France family ever since.
And his
Uh,
wife drove too.
oh yeah, Patty Moise, great
Right.
race car driver. The whole family, they're very knowledgeable. We have mutual friends, but uh, he was serious.
It's amazing.
He was serious. And I said, "I refuse to accept that as an answer." And I said, I want to talk to Phelps. And his exact words to me, I says, "Look, I talked to Steve Phelps numerous times. And his exact words was, 'Well, that was your first mistake.'" Okay. My first mistake was talking to the president.
President of NASCAR.
When I grew up racing and all through the era, we talked to Mike Helton, man. He's the man. If Helton gave you an answer, that's
Right.
it. He's still respected. He's the most respected person in NASCAR racing still this day.
You could tell.
Yeah. And it all come down after 820 something NASCAR races combined, 11 Daytona 500s. You mentioned 70 something starts at Daytona.
3
They
wins.
told me I wasn't qualified enough. I didn't have enough experience, and that I would have to acquire experience at their approval to ever be able to drive a Cup car in the future. Then, a month later or so, they go, well, maybe you can drive an Xfinity car and a truck somewhere. And then later in the year, Darlington, Elton tells I see him on pit road, and I made a point that he's seen me at the same time. And it's like, "Hey, what do you got lined up for a truck or Xfinity car?" And I says, "Elton, nobody wants to sponsor a truck or Xfinity car.
Right.
You know that as well as I do. The Daytona 500 is easy to sponsor. Takes way more money, but it's easy to get a sponsor for. So it's like, well, hang in there. It'll be something to happen." That was the answer. And so we proceed on throughout the year. And I remember in October, I was at Charlotte, and I had a friend of mine, a young lady that went with me to the race. And I like Elton as a person. And he walked in, and I says, "Hey, I want to introduce you to Elton Sawyer. This is the guy that wouldn't let me run at Daytona." And he goes, "No, it wasn't all me. It wasn't all my fault." I said, "Well, everybody told me it was your fault." He said, "That's a lie. It's not my fault." So there was a whole lot of storylines. And I'm going to be honest with you, what's going to really shock you out of all this, that from all the resources that have been given to me, and this all came down to actually what turned out to be a political comment.
I was just going to ask you,
After
Mike.
I talked to Steve Phelps, I put a posting up that I was invited to the presidential inauguration in Washington, D.C., showing a DJT hat on. Steve Phelps is a hardcore Democrat. He was in the Clinton Foundation, all that stuff. And it's amazing. 3 days after he told me everything, and I announced I was going to the presidential inauguration, which I thought was a big deal. I was excited. I
Yeah.
mean, you get invited by a state senator to go to the inauguration, and it's pretty for sure there was a political vendetta.
Yeah.
And they want to say it wasn't, but what other reason is there?
Well, and that was going to be one of my questions, right? Was did you think it was an ulterior motive? Because it doesn't make sense when you look at the everybody else who's getting approved, and I think of guys like Connor Daly, who didn't have a whole ton of experience in stock cars, who gets approved to run the Daytona 500, no problem. And so it didn't make a whole lot of sense. I thought maybe it was something political, or I thought, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, I thought maybe it was just age discrimination at one point, looking at you that you're 65 years old, and they go, oh, come on, we don't want a 65-year-old guy running out there. But they've
You know
had
what?
guys who are 65 running, like Shepard and Mark Thompson ran at an older age, so I didn't understand that one either. But
I could have accepted that if that was their answer and it was in writing somewhere. But hey, and let me explain this. First of all, I love NASCAR.
for sure.
I love the series of NASCAR racing. I won the Winston Racing Series in 1990. That gave me my opportunity to come NASCAR racing. My brother Rusty was already here, but I had a NASCAR championship to my name, and it allowed me to make a living for 25 years. That I made a not a really great living, but a better than average living. I unfortunately never earned that superstar money that was being made back in those times. But I was so happy. Man, a kid grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, got to drive race cars. I won Daytona 3 times. Can you imagine that? A kid from St.
No,
Louis,
I
Missouri
couldn't.
won Daytona 3 times. I won Talladega 3 times in different vehicles. Life couldn't be any better. Yes, I didn't have that long career that my brother had with the exact same team and all that. I struggled and I worked hard, but I gave my heart and soul to NASCAR.
And and I'll be honest, from the outside as a fan growing up, watching you race, Mike, I think you were better than, especially in Cup, than what you give credit for. I know there's some teams that you raced for that didn't necessarily have the best funding. You know, I thought you did fine in the 90 car for Ginny Donlevy. I thought even when you drove AJ's car, you were fine. So, and nobody else really had a ton of success in those cars either. So,
Hey,
um,
AJ invited me to the Indy 500 2 years ago, so I
oh,
did all
nice.
right. Otherwise, he wouldn't have invited me.
AJ's a great guy. But I guess from a holistic standpoint, Mike, and thanks for telling us that story because there was a lot of confusion, I guess, initially from a lot of us, at least from my standpoint, of why exactly Mike Wallace. Like it was almost like there was something against it, and
Well,
you
they
were
would never admit to it. I'm just
right,
putting two and two together to make four. I mean,
right. Of
they're
course, they would
still
never admit it.
today. It's like nobody will say why I couldn't run.
Hey,
Today is go run a truck car, go run a truck, go run an Xfinity car or O'Reilly car, and we'll approve you, and then we'll approve you to run a short track in the Cup Series, and then we'll figure out Daytona for the following year. But that's probably not going to happen.
yeah. So overall, do you think there like as far as an approval process is concerned, do you think there needs to be one in NASCAR? Do you think it's valuable to have like starts in grassroots racing and then work your way up to ARCA and have a couple of a year or two there and then move to the trucks and move to Xfinity? And I get, some people get put on the fast track even without um, like them agreeing to it, right? Like I think of Danica, and I feel like Danica was rushed to Cup because of just her popularity. And I think Cletus is sort of on that path where he's kind of being rushed into the Xfinity Series or Truck Series before he's really ready for it. But do you think it's valuable to have that approval process, or do you think it's something that basically anybody can race if they have the money?
Well, you've asked two different questions there. Number one, yes, anybody can race if they have the money. Okay, let's just clear that up. If you have money, if I had money today, I could go drive somebody's truck. I could drive somebody's Xfinity car. I could then get approved, and if I had money, I could buy myself a Cup ride.
Right,
Not as many available over there as are in the Truck Series.
for sure.
But let's ask a simple question about this. Let's revert to question: what's the biggest sport in the world that NASCAR competes against?
The NFL.
Okay, so do you come out of elementary school and go to the NFL?
No, sir.
Do you come out of elementary school and go to some form of next in line? Do you go to college out of elementary school?
No, sir.
Yes. So we're competing, we're trying, and they always use it. NASCAR always uses the NFL. That's why the Daytona 500 gets changed
Moves.
around week in to week out, not to compete against the Super Bowl.
No question.
Yes. First of all, I think children need to grow up to be children first, then young adults, and then become, professional race car drivers. I don't think it's good for a child, a 13, 14, 15-year-old child. I'm watching the ARCA race from Phoenix as I'm talking to you. There's 15-year-olds running the
Right.
race. They don't have a childhood. They don't
Right.
even know what they're supposed to act like.
Right.
So let's just compare to the biggest forms of sports that we're competing against. We use the NFL. So what is the other major sport or couple sports? Major League Baseball, right? Do you come straight out of elementary school and go play for the major league?
No, you got
I don't
minors
think
and stuff.
so.
Right.
I think you go through a couple steps of minor league ball.
Right.
We have the Kannapolis Cannonballers here in our area, which is what do you call it, a four A ball or something. I don't know.
Right.
It's
Single A. Yeah.
pretty far down the list. Then if you become a triple A player, then you might get called up. You play there for a couple of years, and if you're lucky, you get called up. But doesn't mean you're going to get called up, and it doesn't matter how much money your parents have or your grandparents have. So if you're going to have the quality of the field really good and supposed to be the most elite form of motorsports drivers in the world in NASCAR racing, and that's what it used to be. It used to be the very best of the best that came from the short track world. The Rusty Wallace, Mark Martin, Ted Musgrave, ASA Day, winning races there and moving on. Or in the South, you ran the late model stock car series and all that. Yes, and I still believe there should be a an order of how you get approved. There used to be in NASCAR. I don't know that it ever was actually a written rule or a written law, but you would have to run a half-mile racetrack, an IRP, a Martinsville, a Hickory,
Right.
and and show that you didn't cause a bunch of wrecks there or any wrecks. You'd have to run well enough and not get in trouble. Then you would go to a 3/4 mile or a mile racetrack and run some races there. Then you would be elevated in the Busch Series to run a speedway, a mile and a half, and then finally they would let you run Daytona or Talladega, 2.5 mile racetrack. But there was a stair step.
Right. Was that how it
And
was when you came up, Mike? Do you remember?
that's exactly how it was when I came up. I won the NASCAR Winston Racing Series in 1990.
Right.
Okay, that was a regional series that Winston sponsored. NASCAR was I always say NASCAR and RJR made my career. Let me rephrase that terminology. Allowed me to have a career in motorsports. But, I didn't get to go straight to Daytona the first time I ever raced.
Right.
So I think there needs to be a pecking order. Does it really mean a lot? I don't know. As you mentioned, a Kyle Petty, guys like that early in their careers. But racing was, even though it's all the same racetracks, okay, all the same racetracks, it was quite a bit different back then.
No question. And they could
Cars were
test
not
back then too.
close. Competition was not as close. The field was separated. You put me in a good car, you go out and run wide open, and you do well.
Right.
So I'm not sure where and who's leading the pack in the competition side. I did find out in October last year it's not only Elton Sawyer who we thought was the head of competition,
Right.
because he told me there was other people helped make that decision.
Right.
Well, who's out there?
Yeah.
I think for all sake, especially with Cletus's deal, and hey, I'm thrilled to death for the guy, man. I think it's cooler than heck. I think my little brother was telling me he's so excited. Kenny, he's getting to go run a Crown Vic race down at Cletus's racetrack in April. So everybody wants to hang out in Cletus's world.
Right.
Seriously. I mean, it's like Dale Jr. wants to hang out in Cletus's world.
Yep.
He had him on his download immediately when the RCR announcement come about. And so kudos to him. He's a very nice individual. And if he puts his heart and soul in it, he'll be a really good race car driver.
And a couple more if you don't mind. Uh, to me, the whole Cletus McFarland thing, and you touched on a little bit, is a little bit of a microcosm of what I think is a bigger issue. And you can again tell me if I'm misunderstanding things, but I feel like when you started in the early '90s and in the late '90s and the early 2000s, the ownership basically the sponsor was with the owners, right? When you got to Junie Donlevy had Hollig Myers forever, for a long time, and multiple drivers. Dick Trickle drove that car, you drove that car, others drove that car. Same thing with AJ's sponsorship there in the 14 and others. You didn't take the sponsor with you. Like Mike Wallace didn't have Hollig Myers and said, you know what, I'm going to take Hollig Myers wherever I go. Where that seems to be the deal a lot today, where a driver has a sponsor and he's the one that dictates where he races and a lot of that decision. And I'm just would be curious as far as your opinion of why that's changed since basically the early 90s and early 2000s to today, where it seems like that sponsorships are tied to the drivers more than they are tied to the teams or the owners like they were in the early 90s.
Without a doubt, you're correct. In 2007 is when it changed. And when it changed when Mike Wallace brought Geico Insurance Company with a partner that was signed to Mike Wallace Racing. The
Right.
sponsorship was signed to me personally. Okay, so it's 2007. I had a sponsorship agreement for millions of dollars in 2007, 2008, and 2009. Public announcement to Charlotte Motor Speedway in the media center. President of Geico says this is the first time ever that they've signed directly with the driver, and it's new to NASCAR that the driver has brought all the sponsorship to it. Made it very public. 2007, 2008, we go along. 2007, everything is fine. It started 2008. I get a phone call from Steve Phelps 30 minutes before they're going to announce that Nationwide is going to take over the complete title sponsorship of the Busch Series. And they're not going to, what they call a sunset provision before. If you're already in the sport, you had to stay with the driver that you were with and the team that you're with, or whoever you had it signed with. 30
Right.
minutes. 30. Now, they've been working on this for a long period of time. 30
For
minutes
sure.
before they made the official announcement. I end up, of course, I'm distraught now. I call my connection, help me put the deal together at Geico. I call Geico, explain what's going on. They're pissed. They're like, it's kind of telling you that like you cheated on your wife, but you can hang out with her for another year, but you get your girlfriend's in the waiting, and that's just what it amounted to. And they says, look, we're done after 2008. We've already started the season. We got so much built into it already. You can sue us if you want to, but that's we got when we get down to that, we got more lawyers than you got. We don't need to end this relationship. We're gonna go. We're gonna do something else. Well, they did. They ended up going cup racing, but they went with some other people.
Jermaine. Right.
Totally understandable, because I wasn't smart enough to know that NASCAR was going to pull the rug out from under me.
Right. And so that the insurance, right, is that the Nationwide and Geico are insurance companies, and it was compete clause, right? And you kind of
Correct.
saw that in the Cup Series with Sprint and Singular Wireless
You
with
got to
Jeff
back that
Burton.
up. When they did that with AT&T, NASCAR did what they call a sunset provision,
Right.
and that allowed Richard Childress to retain that sponsorship on the 31 car through Singular/slash AT&T for as long as the sponsor wanted to stay involved in the sport. But it could only be with Richard Childress Racing.
Right.
Okay, they decided they weren't going to do that any longer. I happened to be the one that was the benefit, that happened to. We go to Daytona for winter practice, which happens in January. It's announced that Nationwide's going to be the series sponsor. We show up down there for winter testing. Of course, there's no fans there. There's nothing, but there's not one notice of anything about Nationwide. Nobody's there. There's no big publicity about it. Nothing. But they had us doing driver appearances in the media center, and I remember I did a driver's appearance with Kevin Harvick, Cale Gale, and myself. Cale Gale was driving for Kevin Harvick at the time.
The trucks. Right.
And they asked me what I thought about what was going on. And I says, well, I would think if they were going to be the title series sponsor, we'd at least have some representation down here during Speed Week or, during winter testing.
Right.
No more than I left that racetrack, I got in my car and I get a phone call from Steve O'Donnell, who's across the street, telling me that I am a disgrace to NASCAR
Ugh.
motorsports because, I didn't say good things about Nationwide. Now, you got to remember, they've taken millions of dollars away from me that was signed through
Right.
me
Right.
personally. and tells me I'm a disgrace to the sport.
Terrible.
He's never apologized for that.
Terrible.
And so it is there a little bitter animosity between me and Steve O'Donnell? Sure, there is, but that doesn't matter. He's still the president of NASCAR. He'll have his job until they fire him or he goes somewhere else. And at the salaries they're making, he's not going to leave.
So, do you think there's any way to kind of get it back to where it was in the 90s, or do you think it's sort of toothpaste out of the tube where we'll never get back to the owners basically having control of who drives their cars and the sponsorships basically saying, okay, obviously they have to sign off on it, but they stick with the owners rather than the drivers taking the sponsors. Do you think that's a long gone, or do you think there's a path to where maybe we get a little bit of that back? Because to me,
It's not. You got to remember, it's not totally gone. The hero teams, the
Gibbs,
Rick Hendrick, the Roger Penske,
right?
a little bit of JGR, and all of 2311 are controlled by the ownership group. Okay, they decide who they're going to put in their cars. It's everybody that's 10th on, and I'm just throwing a number out here.
For sure.
10th on back wants money. They want drivers to bring money. They're paying drivers less money than they ever have. Drivers, it actually would be a disgrace for drivers to disclose what they're getting paid to drive a NASCAR Cup Series car today. The guys that are 10th on back, because they're, compared to different sports where they just keep escalating the salaries for the drivers or, for the team players. Excuse me, I'm sorry, a left fielder, an outfielder
Right.
are getting paid crazy money. The owners got together and created the RTA group, Race Team Alliance. They all agreed they're only going to pay so much money in salaries and all that, and everything just got really subdued. And that's just what you're stuck with. Now, if somebody offered me an opportunity to go drive a race car for little money but a percentage of the winnings, I would still do it today. And
Right.
I think that's the joke about Cletus saying I'm getting paid $1 because I believe that's the deal.
Right.
But
Yeah.
he'll get a percentage of it, and I would bet that the Tommy's Car Wash brand, which is an incredible car wash, I can wash my dually through there. That probably was something Cletus put together,
For sure.
and it all worked. And man, I wish I was in his spot.
For sure. Well, Mike, I really thank you a lot. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I appreciate the half hour you gave me. It was insightful, and it really is. Again, every time I see somebody get approved, and I kind of go like this, I think that's kind of a slap in the face to Mike Wallace. So I appreciate the support and appreciate coming on tonight, and hope you enjoyed yourself a little bit.
Total slap in the face, but you know what I'm going to do? In 2 weeks, I'm going to go to Daytona as a NASCAR alumni member with my hard card that Amber Wells sent me, and I'm going to walk around and I'm going to say hello to everybody, and I'm going to go out and talk to the fans that made the sport popular, and we're going to have a great time.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate it.